Thank you very much, Mr. President, and through you to the members. I want to first of all begin by thanking the President and the Chair of Ways and Means for the work that has been done on this budget in general. And there are so many good things in this budget. I was proud to stand with a number of the members here in supporting the Senate's version of the EITC, something I know that the gentleman from the West had put a lot of work into, and a number of colleagues here had put an idea on the table to bring tax relief to thousands of people throughout Massachusetts. Some 415,000 or more people in the Commonwealth will benefit from this budget as a result of that one provision, that idea coming forward from the Massachusetts State Senate. And the reason why so many of us have been concerned about that issue, we have heard quite often from the gentleman from the Cape and the Islands, the senator from Arlington, from the senator from Lynn, and so many others about income inequality in our own Senate President, talking about this issue and the importance of this issue. And when we focus in on this issue, the EITC, even in the final version of this budget, which one could actually make the argument is a better version, still falls significantly short from where we need to be, ultimately. There's so much more that we need to do. The senator from the Cape and the Islands, for those that attended the Senate seminars that are starting to take place, had a very interesting seminar that came forward and explained to all of us some of the history of how we've got to where we are, not only here in Massachusetts, but in America, and what is starting to happen in terms of the historic consequences that is driving this gaping gap between the very, very, very wealthy in our society and the rest of us. And every year, it gets worse. And one of the things that we learned during that seminar is that what has happened relative to labor standards in America is at the core of what is taking place relative to the gap that is ever widening. The amount of activity in the private sector in terms of labor unions that have diminished in the last 20, 30 years, and how that has had a significant impact in terms of having a counterbalance force to be able to speak out against injustice in the private sector and to bring a balance between the multinational corporate America and the average worker. Minimum wage is one of the issues we fought for and got adopted here in this chamber, but it still falls short of where we should have been at the time. We learned that too that day at that seminar. So I want to thank the gentleman from the Cape and the Islands for his leadership on this issue, because it's very instructive, in particular with the issue I want to bring up in terms of this budget. As the provision, you may be surprised I want to talk about, dealing with the privatization of services in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, in this case, dealing with the MBTA. Now, in terms of the Taxpayer Protection Act, that is law, and even after this budget passes, will be law all across the executive branch of the Commonwealth, except for the MBTA and some of the other agencies that were exempt when we passed the statute back in 1993. Now, when we passed that statute in December of '93, and there are only a few people that are here in the chamber that we're here to vote on that statute. One or two that voted against it, and the balance that supported it. It didn't happen easily. It took a full year to get the statute in place. And why did we put that statute on the books in the Commonwealth? I think it bears repeating as to why we put it on the books in the first place. We put it on the books to protect the taxpayer of the Commonwealth. Because when we're going to take our public assets, and hand those public assets over to a private entity to provide a public service, we should insist, firstly, that that process be transparent, open to the public. Everybody should be able to see what's going on. Not after the fact, before the deal is done. Upfront, honest, and open. That's the first part of the statute. A public, open process, transparent to all. And then we wanted to make sure that there was accountability, that we had a third party that would be able to look at that process and give an independent judgment. And we debated, should we have the IG do it? Should we have the AG do it? Who should do it? And we decided to have the individual who is elected by the citizens of the Commonwealth, whether they elect a Democrat, whether they elect a Republican. It would be the independent auditor of the Commonwealth representing the people of the Commonwealth. Not a party, not an insider deal, but somebody that had to go out and explain to the people why their decision was the decision that they made. And then finally we said, Make sure you do a comprehensive cost-benefit analysis so that we're dealing not only with the quantitative issues, but the quality issues involved. Will we have the same quality of service at the end of the day? And if you could make it through the process, open and transparent, we have the accountability, and if you save the taxpayer, we started off by saying 10%. Save the taxpayer at least 10%. That got negotiated out through the whole year, down to 1 penny. Save the taxpayer a penny, do the other provisions, you got the contract. That's the law. That's what the present law provides and will provide for all the rest of the executive branch. Now, the administration right now, in the southeast region of the state, gentleman from Fall River knows this well, is in the process of contracting out emergency mental health services for the Commonwealth. General from New Bedford knows this well. What are they doing? They're using the Taxpayer Protection Act. Has anybody here heard the administration yell and scream or complain that they were going to have some problem about contracting out services in the southeast area for mental health? Haven't heard a peep out of them down the hall. Haven't heard it's too complicated. Haven't heard it can't be done. Haven't heard anything from them. You know why? They believe they can do it. And they don't mind taking a shot at it with a transparent process because they think they can win the services. And they very well might be able to win those services and contract them out privately. And if they meet all those standards, they can do it. As a matter of fact, all the proposals that have been submitted for privatization and have gone to the independent arbiter here, the state auditor, 80% of those services have been approved. 80%. So now we fast forward to this winter snowstorm that took place. But before we do that, let's put back in the back of your head, in '93, back then, the person that was in charge of privatization of human services in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts was none other than our present governor. And he did everything he could to stop that law from coming on the books. Go back even farther. Look at who the first executive director was of the Pioneer Institute, our present governor. Connected to the Pioneer Institute and the individual who was in charge of privatization back during the 90s, back during the early part of the 90s through 93. The privatization attempts that took place during that period of time led a globe spotlight team to expose countless numbers of privatization schemes gone wrong. It exposed handouts of contracts, improper documentation, waste, potential fraud and abuse in the system that led the sitting governor, Governor Well, to have a press conference and announce that he was putting in place an executive order that would put a cooling off period on his executive branch officials so that they would not be leaving the executive branch to go take the jobs in the private sector contracts that were being created across the street. My friends, my colleagues, this all happened. Google it. Look it up. It's real. It happened, and I am worried because a provision in this budget that is here, that it will happen again. Now, I am, as an individual senator, I represent the 1st Plymouth and Bristol District. The number of T employees that are in my district I can count on one hand. Very few. As a matter of fact, we've been trying to get rail service for the whole time I've been in public office, probably over 30 some odd years, trying to get it down the South Coast. The latest thing I hear coming out of the administration's office is maybe wanting to have a private company set up a line from Middleborough down to New Bedford, starting off as a tourism thing. The senator from New Bedford. I think you might have heard him say, no thank you to me too. Because I know that means they want a bait and switch. Running for office, we're for South Coast Rail. After we get in, let's have a private company do some tourism in the southeast region, leave for Middleborough, go to New Bedford. They can make some money. Maybe there'll be some contributors. And they can't say they're not getting South Coast Rail, even though it might take twice as long to get there, to Boston, from New Bedford. So watch that one. Keep your eye on that one. That's coming. That's coming down the road. So I'm very concerned about this provision. I shouldn't be as concerned as I am because I don't have a lot of the direct impact that would take place in my particular regional economy as will take place in the metropolitan Boston area if things go wrong. By things going wrong, I mean the MBTA, under the legislation that is before us right now, could be 100% privatized within months, not years. Months. Those bus drivers, overwhelming majority women, African American, minorities, that have finally got themselves up into a middle-class state, we will see potentially a future for them which is all about heading towards the lowest common denominator in terms of a race to the bottom. A race to the bottom. Any profits that a company would make, they'd make on the backs of those workers. Decreased wages, decreased health care, that's how they make the profits. And why do I know that? Anybody that would like to see the video, I'd like to send it to you. A hearing that Elizabeth Warren had in Washington, D.C., just the last couple of weeks, where she had transportation experts in before her and they took a look at a General Accounting Office report, GAO report, looking at all transportation services in the country. They did a survey, and on average, the private providers of service will cost more money, not less. And why? Because they have to make a profit. They have to make they have to have the cost of the service, make a profit, put some money in their pocket, pay their bills, and go get another contract. That's what's going on all across America. Right now, there are 19 states in the United States that are taking previously privatized work and bringing it back in-house, not the other way around. 19 others. I'll send you the report. Dr. Elliott Sklar, Columbia University, noted transportation economist, and others that have worked on this issue with significant background on this issue. I'll send you the report. That's what's going on across America on this issue. Federal hearings, states looking at this issue, not heading in the direction that this governor wants to head in on this issue. Now, I'm going to conclude very soon, I promise you. But before I do, I want to make just a couple of other points. You know, I was at the Joint Transportation Committee hearing that our very capable Senate Chairman of Transportation held with the Chairman on the House side, Chairman Strauss. And I think they did a phenomenal job with that hearing. But I was there to hear with my own ears and watch with my own eyes as the Governor of the Commonwealth stated he was not interested in impacting in any way the workers, the fine workers at the T. The men and women working at the T, he was not interested in impacting them at all. That's what he said publicly. Get the record. I believe there's video of it. That's what he has continued to say. I spoke with the Speaker of the House this morning when I came in, before I came up to the chamber. And I asked him, Mr. Speaker, why are we doing this? Why would we be heading in this direction that has the potential of impacting so many people in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and in particular in the Metro Boston region, that could actually depress wages to the extent that all of these workers will soon be on mass health. So we'll be subsidizing them in another way, while a private company will be doing just fine. By the way, anybody hear of a company called Keolis? Keolis? It's not a state company. It's a privatized company. Keolis. Some of the worst records in terms of time on in our history at the T. But yet somehow this magical thing that is going to be done by suspending for 3 years the privatization accountability provisions are going to somehow bring us to a point in time where things will be better for the taxpayer. Says who? Says the Pioneer Institute. Surprise, surprise, surprise. Says the Massachusetts Fiscal Alliance. Surprise, surprise, surprise. We all know the connection between those two organizations and the present administration. I wish more of the mainstream media would start to tell the public what those connections are about. Because then maybe the general public would have a better understanding as to why the special interests that are financing both of these organizations are fighting so hard and putting so much corporate money into a campaign so that you can have privatization of services without any oversight, little accountability, and no proof that the taxpayer is going to actually save some money. They love that. They love that. Those privateers out there on the corporate side of the equation, they love that scenario coming up. They can't wait. So there's one provision here, and it's about the privatization statute. Now, many have not experienced it. Some of you may have. But we do. We are in the process right now of debating the acceptance of the conference committee report. It is not the budget. It's the acceptance of the conference committee report, as the minority leader correctly referenced a few minutes ago. So we can accept the conference committee report, and then we're voting on the budget. Or we could reject the conference committee report, and that provision goes back to conference, and that provision can go back to conference for 15 minutes, 2 hours. Today's July 8th. There are 31 days, if I'm not mistaken, in July. We have a 1/12 budget. We have a budget all the way till the end of this month. We don't have to do anything to have a budget till the end of this month. We could go another week and make sure that what the 32 senators that talked to me on this issue, when we may have had a vote on this issue, and gave me their commitment on that vote, if we had a vote, that they would not be voting for this issue. And I suspect that's one of the reasons why it wasn't in the budget coming out of the Senate. Because the Senate's action was already known, what it would have been. And so we voted on a budget that did not have the privatization piece in it at all. To get the law on the books in the Commonwealth, we had to go through a full year of public debate and scrutiny, countless hearings, countless public input, debates in the House, debates in the Senate, debates back in the House, debates back in the Senate to get it on the books. But to take a piece of it off, all it takes is one person on the other chamber to slip it into the budget without a hearing, without debate, without a roll call, without a vote, and put it on the table so we have no choice if we want to risk some of these other provisions, important provisions that are in this budget, we have no choice but to give in. Those are not the types of negotiations that we used to have around here. When folks had that type of scenario going on, where they felt that strongly on the House or the Senate, many times those provisions were kept in conference until they could be worked out another way. I know the very competent chair of Ways and Means did everything she could, and our president did everything he could to try to prevent what we're dealing with right now from being a reality before us. But there were so many other issues that we're dealing with statewide that they didn't want those issues to be, impacted. For me, personally, this is one of those issues, and we all have them. For some of you, it may be choice. For some of you, it might be the death penalty. For some of you, it may be guns. For some of you, it may be something else. For me, it's economic justice issues. And this is at the heart of economic justice in terms of how people could possibly be impacted and how we can prevent it here and now, simply by just giving it another chance. Maybe it's another day. Maybe we're back here next week. But why not take that chance? Some of you are thinking, we'll deal with it in the transportation bill. I predict we're not going to see a transportation bill. Everything's in the budget. Why do we need to have a transportation bill if we dealt with most of it in the budget? Actually, I read the Speaker saying those similar comments in the State House News this week. Might not need to have a transportation bill if there are enough tools in place in the budget. And even if we had a transportation bill, and even if we put in the transportation bill provisions that we collectively wanted, the governor can simply veto those provisions, and then we would need 2/3 vote to override the governor on those provisions. So I'm asking all of you to do what I know many of you in your heart want to do. And you're in a difficult situation here this afternoon, because we've got this bill before us. We've heard it articulated already. We've got some great provisions in here. We've got a good budget for the most part. For me, this taints the budget. For my friends in the minority party, I'm sure they are holding back the joy and the glee about this provision being in the budget, not wanting to have me go on another hour. So thank you for your restraint. But I simply want to say to you, let's give it a shot. And if for no other reason than to put on the public record that there are some of us in this chamber that believe that economic equality, and I believe that this is part of a national movement. This is one piece of a national movement to underpin labor and to continue decreasing the effectiveness and the importance of labor standards in American society. I believe if there was an opportunity to get it done, we would have a management rights bill before us across the board. There are some on the far right, and I wouldn't put my colleagues that are here in that category, but there are some on the far right that would not be happy until every public employee only has a 401k. That's where we're headed. Now, they happen to be taxpayers too. They pay taxes. They get up every day, go to work. Final point on the T. There's been a lot of press about the historic storm that we had this winter. And there's been a lot of blame to go around, but almost everyone, to the person, has pointed to the management. It was a management problem. The women and the men that are driving those buses from one location to another have had absolutely nothing to do with the management. They're the ones that are being told what to do every day. They didn't get a chance to sit in any boardroom and come up with a plan. No, they're the workers. They're the workers. Just like in a company in the private sector that goes bankrupt. It's not the workers. It's the leaders who decide to, outsource jobs to other countries in the world. Take the profit and go home and tell the rest of the workers, see if you can figure it out for yourself. I just don't think we should be part of that. The reason why we had 95% on time during the worst snowstorm in the history of our state is because of those workers. Those workers were the ones that got themselves to those jobs, made sure they did the right thing, and got as much done in the best way that they could under the most extraordinary circumstances. And it was the management who failed us. The management, not the workers. So let us not have a red herring in something that has had absolutely nothing to do with the T's woes be placed into this budget in terms of a resolution of the T, like somehow this provision is going to solve any problem with the T. The Pioneer Institute today, actually it was yesterday, and this really got me yesterday. Pioneer Institute released a report. I started getting calls, I'd say about a half hour after I made it back to my home after our colleague, former Senator Kennedy's funeral. That really ticked me off. That they would pick that day to release their report because they knew on that day we all would be a little busy, a little tied up on that day. And the last thing we would be able to do on that day would be able to turn around documents very quickly and get it back out to the press to get the other side of the story out. I think that was pretty sad. And what was the saddest of it all is that the document they put out, and I said this to the press, if you read the Boston Herald, you would read my quote. And in the Boston Herald, it said, I thought it was really, quote, unquote, really, and then they stopped using the quotes, and it says wrong. That's not what I said. What I said, it was really BS. And I'm not talking about a baccalaureate degree. That's what I said. Because that's what it is. They have put out there made up numbers because they're responding to the special interest money that is the dark money that so many in this chamber have been trying to get rid of. Unaccountable money in the political system, where you can't track it, you don't know where it comes from, you don't know who's providing it. I have to give them credit, though, because they did provide some of the 100,000 plus donors. Koch brothers are there, 100,000 plus. And a whole range of others, 100,000 plus. But 100,000 plus could be 1 million, could be 2 million. We don't know. On the labor side, somebody could say that's just as bad. All the labor money, labor ads. And they're correct, except for one thing. They report it. They're accountable. It's public. It's transparent. They file it with the Office of Campaign Finance just like we do. On the other side, it's hidden. It's behind the curtain. Nobody knows who's involved. That's wrong. Let's put it on the table, have it be transparent. So I'm asking you to join with me in supporting transparency by sending this conference committee report back to conference, and then if it comes back again, and we'll do the budget. And if it's not successful, if a roll call on this issue is not successful, I'll be supporting the budget, because I then would have done everything possible that I could have done as a legislator by voting no on the conference committee report. Mr. President, I ask when a vote is taken on this, it be taken by a call of the yeas and nays.
The gentleman asked when the vote on the matter be